A millionaire rancher found 4 little quadruplets abandoned inside his old barn. Years later, a helicopter passed right in front of his door. The creaking of the old barn door echoed through the deserted structure, blending with the howl of the autumn wind. Michael Thompson hesitated for a moment, his imposing silhouette framed against the golden glow of sunset. Something felt different. In 15 years living alone on that ranch, he had never experienced such restlessness. The beam of his flashlight swept across the dusty surroundings, revealing forgotten bales of hay and rusted tools. A subtle movement among the shadows made his heart pound. Another sound, this time unmistakable, a muffled sob. "Is anyone there?" His deep voice resonated through the ancient rafters. The silence that followed was more unsettling than the crying. Michael proceeded with caution, his heavy steps causing the wooden floor to protest. The beam of light caught a small, bare foot hiding behind a bale of hay. "I won't hurt you," he softened his voice, moving closer. When he rounded the bale, the sight made him stagger. 4 tiny girls, practically identical, were huddled in a corner, trembling like leaves in the wind. Their dirty, torn clothes hardly protected them from October's biting cold. Their tear and dust-streaked faces stared at him in utter terror. Michael lowered his flashlight, trying to appear less intimidating. His mind spun in search of an explanation. Quadruplets? Here? How? Why? The questions crowded his mind as he tried to process this surreal scene. "Hello, little ones," he tried again, crouching to their level. "You must be cold." One of the girls, the one who seemed braver, clutched her sisters tighter. Her green eyes, though fearful, held a defiant spark. The other 3 hid behind her as if seeking protection. Michael slowly removed his coat, extending it toward them. He could see them shivering even in the dim barn light. "Take it," he offered, leaving the coat on the ground and backing up a few steps. Long seconds passed before the brave girl, whose name he would later learn was Sophie, reached out a trembling hand and pulled the coat over her sisters as best she could. One of their stomachs growled audibly in the tense silence, and Michael felt his heart tighten. How long had they gone without eating? Who would abandon 4 children so small? "You must be hungry," he remarked gently. "I have hot chocolate and cookies in the house, and a nice warm heater too." The girls glanced at each other, a silent communication passing among them. The temperature kept dropping, and even under his coat they continued to tremble. "I won't force you," Michael continued, "but it's getting really cold here. You can come with me to the house, warm up and eat something. Then we can decide what to do, all right?" The green-eyed girl, Sophie, whispered something to her sisters. One of them shook her head no, but another, the one he would later know as Claire, pointed to her own belly with a sad little pout. Michael stayed put, letting them make the decision. His mind was already calculating the next steps. He would have to call the police, obviously, but something about this scene disturbed him profoundly. The fear in the girl's eyes didn't seem to be just about a stranger in front of them. It was something deeper, darker. Sophie finally stood, still keeping her sisters close. Her chin quivered, but there was resolve in her gaze. "Do you really have hot chocolate?" Her voice was just a whisper, but to Michael it sounded like a small miracle. "Yes, I do. And I can make more if you'd like." One by one, the other girls stood as well, supporting each other. Michael noticed how they carefully avoided looking at a particular corner of the barn, where an old blanket was folded alongside a few empty food wrappers. "How long have you been here?" he couldn't help asking. Three nights," replied another of the girls, Anne, as he'd later learn, her voice barely audible. Michael felt a wave of anger rise in his chest. 3 nights. Alone. In the cold. He forced himself to keep a neutral expression, not wanting to scare them even more. "Well, let's fix that," he said, maintaining a firm yet gentle tone. "You're very brave. You know that. Now let's go inside, because this cold is no joke." They moved like a small flock of frightened birds, always together, always touching, as if afraid of being separated. Michael led the way, lighting the path with his flashlight, his heart heavy at the sound of their hesitant steps behind him. As they walked along the trail leading to the main house, he watched the stars begin to dot the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, someone had abandoned 4 children to their fate, Somewhere, someone believed they didn't deserve protection, love, care. The porch light turned on automatically as they approached, and he heard the little ones sigh in unison. The two-story house, its stone walls and illuminated windows, must have looked like a castle to them in that moment. Michael climbed the porch steps and opened the door, feeling the welcoming warmth inside envelop him. He turned to the girls, still standing at the foot of the stairs, hesitant. "Welcome," he said simply, extending his hand. Sophie was the first to climb, immediately followed by her sisters. When the last one, Marie, crossed the threshold, Michael sensed something shift in the air. An invisible decision had been made, though he wasn't sure what yet. What he did know, with a certainty that frightened him, was that he would never forget that night in the barn, the night when 4 lost little angels arrived at his door, forever changing the course of his solitary life. The aroma of hot chocolate filled the kitchen as Michael watched the 4 girls gathered at his solid oak table. They drank greedily from oversized mugs, leaving little chocolate mustaches above their small lips. Between sips, they devoured cookies as if there were no tomorrow, cheeks puffed out like tiny chipmunks. The scene might have been almost comical if it weren't for the lump in his throat. 15 years of running one of the largest ranches in the region had not prepared him for this. The phone on the wall seemed to beckon him. Just one call to the police and everything would be solved. It was the correct procedure, the legal, expected step. So why did his fingers refuse to dial? "More chocolate," he offered, noticing how their mugs were nearly empty. Sophie, the group's natural leader, nodded shyly, and her sisters followed suit. As he served more chocolate, Michael studied the details now visible in the kitchen light. Their clothing wasn't just dirty, it was far too thin for the season, as if it had been hastily chosen. Their tangled brown hair, though messy, showed signs of a relatively recent professional cut. And there was something in their mannerisms, in the way they held their mugs, suggesting they came from a refined background. These were not street kids. "Can you tell me your names?" he tried again, taking a seat at the table. The girls exchanged anxious looks before Sophie answered, "I'm Sophie. They're Claire, Anne, and Marie. Those are very pretty names," he said, noticing how each girl reacted to hearing her own name. "And where's your mom?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marie dropped a cookie, tears filling her eyes. Claire immediately embraced her sister, while Anne lowered her gaze into her mug. "We don't have a mom anymore," Sophie finally replied, her small voice burdened with a pain far beyond her 4 years. Michael felt his heart tighten. "What about your dad?" The terror that washed over their faces felt like a punch to his stomach. All 4 shrank at once, as if the word dad itself was a threat. "We're sleepy," Sophie abruptly announced, clearly closing the subject. Michael nodded, understanding. Sure, I'll set up a place for you to sleep." Within 15 minutes, he had transformed his downstairs office into a makeshift bedroom. Extra mattresses from the guest room were laid side by side, covered with fresh sheets and warm quilts. A small lamp cast a soft glow, and he made sure to show the girls where the nearest bathroom was. The little ones settled close together, forming a nest of intertwined limbs beneath the covers. Michael noticed how they positioned themselves, Sophie on the edge, almost guarding them, Claire and Anne in the middle, and Marie nestled safely at the center. "I'll be upstairs if you need anything," he said gently. "Just call." He left the door slightly ajar, letting a sliver of hallway light spill in. Upstairs in his room, he sat at the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. What was he doing? How crazy was it not to call the authorities immediately? But then the images returned, the terror in their eyes when the word dad was mentioned, the way they protected one another, the untold story behind their abandonment in the barn. Something was deeply wrong here, and an inner voice told him that involving the authorities immediately might be catastrophic for the girls. He needed time. Time to understand, to earn their trust, to uncover the truth, and most importantly, time to ensure they were safe, no matter what decision he made. The sound of tiny footsteps in the hallway interrupted his thoughts. He opened the door to find Anne standing there, clutching a corner of the quilt with her fingers. "I can't sleep," she whispered, her big eyes pleading for understanding. Michael knelt to meet her gaze. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" Her face lit up a little, and soon her sisters appeared as well, like silent shadows in the hallway. Minutes later, they were all back in the improvised bedroom. The girls nestled on their mattresses while Michael, seated in a nearby armchair, told them a story about 4 little birds who built a nest in a magic tree. One by one, they succumbed to sleep, their breathing growing soft, their small bodies finally relaxing for the first time in days. Michael stayed there, watching them sleep under the gentle light of the lamp. A decision crystallized in his heart as he observed their peaceful faces. He wouldn't hand them over to a system that might separate them or, worse, return them to whoever had traumatized them. At least not until he was absolutely sure they'd be safe. His ranch was isolated enough. He had the resources, the space, and most importantly, the time. He could keep the girls safe while quietly investigating their background. It was risky, probably illegal, but as he looked at those small, sleeping faces, Michael knew he had no other choice. The next morning, he began making preparations. Strategic phone calls to postpone commitments, a quick trip to town to buy clothes and basic supplies, and above all, a plan forming in his mind. When the girls awoke, they found clean, warm clothes waiting for them, along with a breakfast that could make any child smile: pancakes with chocolate syrup, fresh fruit, and orange juice. "You can stay here for a while," he announced as they ate, trying to sound casual, "until we figure out the best path together, okay?" Sophie studied him with those perceptive green eyes, as though trying to read his soul. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she gave him a slight nod. "Okay," she replied, her small voice filled with a gratitude that made Michael's eyes burn with unshed tears. As he watched the 4 of them eat with growing confidence, Michael understood that his life had changed forever. It wouldn't be easy. There were so many challenges ahead, so many secrets to uncover, so many fears to overcome. But looking at those 4 little survivors, he knew he would do anything to protect them. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the office, now turned into a makeshift children's bedroom, illuminating the new toys scattered on the floor and the colorful clothes folded on a chair. It was only the beginning, Michael thought. Just the first day of a journey that promised to be as challenging as it was rewarding. A giggle, the first he'd heard from them, echoed through the kitchen when Claire dropped a piece of pancake in her lap. The pure and unexpected sound caused something in him to break and rebuild all at once. Yes, he'd made the right decision. The rest, they would figure out day by day, step by step, like a family learning to be a family. Days turned into weeks, and Michael discovered that raising 4 4-year-old girls was like trying to tame a small hurricane of distinct personalities. Though they were identical in appearance, each one was unique in her own special way. Sophie, the natural protector, was always on alert, her green eyes observing everything and everyone with a maturity beyond her years. She was the one who checked the locks before bedtime, who counted her sisters compulsively throughout the day as if she feared one might disappear at any moment. Claire emerged as the artist of the group, filling the kitchen walls with colorful drawings of their new life. Horses, flowers, and a tall figure with gray hair, Michael, showed up repeatedly in her sketches, always smiling, always under a bright sun. Anne was the curious explorer. She followed Michael everywhere, bombarding him with questions about everything from how the tractor worked to why stars only appeared at night. Her questions were like little rays of light, illuminating corners of a life he hadn't even realized were so lonely before. Marie, the most sensitive, found comfort in physical closeness. Whenever something scared her, a distant thunderstorm, an unexpected noise, she would run into Michael's arms, burying her face in his chest until the world made sense again. One particularly peaceful afternoon, as he watched them play in the enclosed garden he had built just for them, Michael realized his heart was completely conquered. He couldn't imagine the ranch without the sound of their laughter, without their small shoes scattered around the house, without the bedtime stories that now shaped his nightly routine. "Michael!" Sophie's voice brought him back to the present. She held a somewhat wilted daisy, fiddling nervously with its petals. "Are you going to be our dad now?" The question caught him off guard, making his heart skip a beat. Before he could answer, Marie approached as well, her big eyes brimming with hope. "Our other father was mean," she whispered, and the air seemed to freeze around them. Michael knelt in the grass, aware that this was a pivotal moment. "Do you want to tell me about him?" All four gathered around him, as they always did for important moments. Claire grabbed Anne's hand, and Anne began to tremble slightly. "He yelled a lot," Sophie began, her tiny voice carrying heavy memories. "And sometimes he hurt Mommy." "She cried in secret," Anne added, eyes fixed on the ground. "In the big closet." Michael felt a wave of anger swell in his chest, but he kept his expression calm. "And where is your Mommy now?" "She went away," Claire answered, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "The man in black took her." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, though the picture they formed was too grim for Michael to contemplate right then. Instead, he opened his arms, and the four girls nestled against him, like chicks seeking protection. "I'm here now," he promised, his voice husky with emotion, "and nobody will ever hurt you again." The days that followed brought a new routine to the ranch. Mornings started early, with breakfasts made together. Michael discovered that the girls loved helping in the kitchen, especially when it involved making pancakes. Then came the educational activities he improvised, determined not to let them fall behind in their development. Afternoons were filled with playtime in the enclosed garden, stories read under the big tree he had planted years ago, and occasionally supervised visits to the pasture to see the horses, always careful to avoid areas visible from the main road. At night, after dinner and bath time, which inevitably ended with more water on the floor than on the girls, it was everyone's favorite time: bedtime stories. Michael discovered he had a natural talent for inventing tales, always starring four brave princesses who fought dragons and saved kingdoms. The isolation that once weighed on him like a cloak of loneliness now served as a protective shield for his improvised family. The ranch, with its vast fields and dense woods, provided a perfect refuge from the outside world. Even so, Michael knew they couldn't stay an island forever. At some point, the past would come knocking. For now, however, he focused on healing invisible wounds with love, patience, and constant presence. One night, as he tucked the girls into the beds that now properly belonged to them, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, Sophie grabbed his hand. "Do you promise not to go away?" she asked, her green eyes gleaming in the dim light. "I promise," he answered without hesitation, his heart overflowing with love for these little warriors that fate had placed in his path. "Then you're our dad now," she declared with a child's simplicity, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Michael felt warm tears stream down his face as he kissed each of their foreheads. "Yes," he whispered, "I think I am." That night, sitting on his porch under a starry sky, Michael Thompson, once known only as the lonely rancher of Serenity Meadows, realized he had found his true purpose in life. Not in the business he had built, not in the land he owned, but in the smiles of four little girls who, against all odds, had become his daughters. The gentle wind carried the scent of wildflowers and the distant sound of crickets, familiar symphony that now held a brand new meaning. Somewhere out there, he knew, there were still unanswered questions and lurking dangers. But here, in this moment, there was only love, protection, and the certainty that once certain bonds are formed, they are too strong to break. Months passed like pages of a book swept by the wind, and Serenity Meadows blossomed with a life it hadn't known in a long time. The girls' laughter echoed through the hallways like music, filling each once empty corner with the joy only children can bring. Michael watched in amazement as his little wildflowers developed. The fear that once inhabited their eyes gradually gave way to a quiet confidence, though occasionally he could see shadows from the past dancing in their gazes. One Sunday morning, as they were preparing breakfast together, a sacred ritual now, the sound of a car on the main road made everyone freeze instantly. Claire dropped the spoon she was holding, the metallic clang shattering the tense silence. "To the cellar," Michael commanded softly, using the code they had established for situations like this. In seconds, the four disappeared through the hidden door under the kitchen rug, descending into the safe space he had painstakingly prepared. Down there, colorful pillows, books, toys, and a flashlight ensured the place wouldn't feel scary. It was only the mail carrier delivering a package, but the incident served as a reminder of the constant danger that loomed over them. Once the girls emerged from the cellar, Michael gathered them in the living room. "You were very brave," he praised them, noting how Sophie kept her sisters close. "Let's review our safety plan, okay?" Anne raised her hand, always the first to speak. "No open windows at the front of the house. Play only in the backyard," Claire added, nervously twisting a strand of hair. "And if anyone asks, we're your nieces," Marie said quietly. Michael felt his heart tighten. He hated the need for so many secrets, so much fear. But until he completely understood the danger they faced, he had no choice. "That's right," he confirmed, hugging them. "And you know why we do all this? Because we're a family," Sophie replied confidently, "and families protect one another." That night, while tidying up the kitchen, Michael found one of Claire's drawings. It showed a big house with dark clouds overhead, 5 figures, 4 small, 1 tall, holding hands. In the corner of the page, almost imperceptible, was a 6th figure, shaded in black, watching from afar. "Claire," he called gently, showing her the drawing when she entered. "Want to tell me about this?" The girl shrank a bit, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Sometimes I dream about him," she whispered, watching through the bedroom window. Michael knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug. "They're just dream, sweetie. No one can hurt you here." But that night, he reinforced every lock and installed more motion-sensitive lights around the house. Life on the ranch continued at its own rhythm, marked by small victories and joyous moments. Michael converted one of the unused rooms into a makeshift classroom where he taught the girls the basics of reading, writing, and math. Sophie devoured children's books like they were candy, showing a particular eagerness to learn. Anne discovered a passion for horses, and Michael carefully showed her how to approach the animals. "Be gentle and firm," he would say, like making friends. Marie, once so fearful, now hummed tunes while watering the small garden they planted together. Her songs were a peculiar mix of made-up melodies and fragments of memory. Sometimes she'd abruptly stop, as though certain lyrics brought back memories she'd rather forget. Claire turned every corner of the house into an art gallery, her drawings depicting the story of their new life. Michael noticed that the dark clouds in her pictures gradually gave way to smiling suns and vivid rainbows. One quiet afternoon, as they watched the sunset from the back porch, Sophie broke the comfortable silence. "I remember the day he got really mad," she said suddenly, her tiny voice carrying a huge burden. "It was when he found out we were different." Michael held his breath, knowing these moments were rare and precious, small windows into a past that needed to be understood. "Different how, sweetheart? We each like different things," she explained, fiddling with the hem of her dress. "He wanted us to be the same, always the same." The revelation hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Michael thought about how each of the girls had blossomed in such unique ways under his care, feeling a wave of gratitude for having found them. "Being different is a gift," he finally said. "That's what makes you special." As the days grew warmer, signaling the arrival of summer, Michael realized he needed to make more permanent decisions. The girls would eventually need documents, formal education, and a story they could present to the outside world. Late at night in his office, he worked on contingency plans, escape routes, alternative identities. Every detail was meticulously laid out in a notebook he kept locked in his safe. "We can't live in the shadows forever," he murmured to himself, gazing at the photos of the girls scattered across his desk, precious records of their progress over the past months. A sound at the door startled him. Marie stood there, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny, silent tears streaming down her face. "Nightmare?" he asked gently, opening his arms. She ran into his embrace, sobbing quietly. "I dreamed you left," she confessed through her tears, "like Mommy." Michael held her tight, his heart aching at the palpable fear in her voice. "Never," he vowed. "We're in this together, remember? Always." Later, with Marie asleep in his arms and the soft sound of her sister's breathing drifting from the room next door, Michael gazed at the starry sky through the window. Every decision he made, each lie he told the outside world, each new precaution, was all for them. He knew the real danger, whatever it was, still lurked out there somewhere. But here, in this moment, in the sanctuary they had built together, they were simply a family trying to heal old wounds and create new memories. And perhaps, he thought as he carried Marie back to her bed, that was the greatest secret of all. How love can turn strangers into family, fear into hope, and a lonely ranch into the most precious place on earth. The 20th floor office reflected its occupants' wealth and power. Robert Anderson stood motionless by the panoramic window, his eyes fixed on the city below, but his mind was miles away. On his mahogany desk, an old photo showed 4 identical 4-year-old girls, innocent smiles frozen in time. "Mr. Anderson," came his secretary's discreet voice. "The investigator has arrived." Robert straightened his silk tie, an automatic gesture betraying his anxiety. "Send him in." Marcus Drake entered with cat-like quiet, his experienced eyes taking in every detail of the room. A middle-aged man with grey at the temples, wearing a well-tailored but unremarkable suit, precisely the type who blends easily into a crowd. "Mr. Anderson," he greeted with a brief nod. "I read the file you sent." Robert gestured for him to sit. "And, honestly," Drake paused, choosing his words, "it's the most intriguing case I've seen. 4 girls vanished 9 years ago without a trace. No bodies, no concrete leads. It's like they just evaporated. But people don't simply evaporate," Drake continued, leaning in slightly. "Especially not 4 children. Someone helped them. Someone with resources, intelligence, and, most importantly, a motive." Robert slid a thick envelope across the desk. "This is just the beginning. Find my daughters, Mr. Drake. Money is no object." In the countryside, spring painted serenity meadows in vibrant colors. Sophie, now 13, practiced archery in the training area Michael had built just for her. Her long brown hair was braided neatly, her concentration absolute as she took aim. Claire, on the other side of the field, captured the scene in her sketchbook, her quick, confident strokes showing years of practice. Her artistic talent had flourished under the private teachers Michael carefully hired and brought to the ranch. Inside the house, Anne was immersed in her science books, preparing for yet another online competition under a pseudonym, one of the ways Michael found to nurture her thirst for knowledge without exposing her to the outside world. Marie, the most musical of the 4, played piano in the music room, her notes flowing through the house like water. Michael watched his daughters from his favorite porch, his heart brimming with pride and apprehension. They had grown so much, each developing unique talents and personalities that could no longer be contained within the ranch alone. Miles away, Marcus Drake commenced his methodical investigation. In a modest hotel room, maps and documents covered the walls. His trained eyes connected invisible dots, constructing a web of possibilities. Rural region, isolated, large properties, significant financial resources, he murmured as he worked. A list of wealthy ranchers began to take shape in his notebook. His initial visits to the region were discreet. A tourist interested in farmland, a researcher studying local agricultural patterns, carefully crafted roles to avoid suspicion. In a local diner, between sips of lukewarm coffee, he got his first real lead. "Thompson? Oh yeah, the recluse rancher," the bartender commented, wiping a glass absently. "He's lived on that huge property for about 20 years. Hardly comes to town now, he sends employees to do all the shopping." "Always been that way?" Drake asked casually. "Actually," the man frowned, thinking, "he used to be more sociable, changed about, let me think, 9-10 years ago, around the time he adopted those nieces of his." Drake kept his expression neutral, though his heart pounded. "Nieces? Quadruplets, so they say. Never seen 'em myself, but folks talk. Sad story, word is the parents died in an accident or something." Back in his hotel room, Drake added new notes to his investigative web. Michael Thompson, wealthy rancher, behavioral shift coinciding with the girl's disappearance, 4 adopted nieces. In his Manhattan office, Robert Anderson received the first updates with a mixture of hope and dread. After 9 years of fruitless searching, He finally had something concrete to go on. "We need absolute certainty," Drake instructed over the phone. "No rash moves. If they really are the ones—" "Understood, Mr. Anderson. I'll keep watching quietly." Unaware of the approaching storm, the girls at the ranch celebrated another secret birthday. Michael had transformed the barn, where it all began, into a magical space adorned with lights and flowers. 13 years, he murmured, watching his daughters dance and laugh. Sophie grabbed his hand, pulling him onto the makeshift dance floor. "The best dad in the world deserves to dance at the party," she declared with a smile. Later, after the celebration, Michael made his usual nighttime rounds around the property when he noticed something different. Fresh tire marks on the dirt road leading to the ranch, where there normally wasn't any traffic. His instincts, sharpened by years of constant vigilance, raised silent alarms. That night, he updated all security protocols and reinforced instructions to the girls. "Just normal precautions," he assured them, not wanting to alarm his daughters. But as he watched them go upstairs to bed, a familiar weight settled in his chest. In his hotel room, Drake organized his findings. Satellite images showed the expanse of Serenity Meadows, its elaborate security measures, the employees' routines. Everything pointed to a meticulously designed operation to keep something or someone hidden from the outside world. "Patience," he muttered, adding yet another photo to his evidence wall. The secret's in the details. The full moon illuminated the ranch as everyone slept, casting long shadows over the property that had served as their refuge for so long. Somewhere in the darkness, the past and present were converging silently, preparing for an encounter that would forever change the fate of everyone involved. Marcus Drake had learned in 20 years of investigation that the best-kept secrets left invisible traces to the untrained eye. He focused on those tiny details as he slowly drove around the road that encircled Serenity Meadows. His rented car, an ordinary model that drew no attention, pulled over on the shoulder. Drake pretended to consult a map, while his high-resolution camera discreetly captured images of the property. The security system was impressive: strategically placed cameras, electrified fences disguised as ordinary fencing, motion sensors concealed as landscaping lights. "No one invests this heavily in security without a good reason," he murmured, making notes in his notebook. At the local diner, where he spent his mornings drinking coffee, he carefully cultivated his persona as a writer, researching the area's history. People loved to talk, especially to someone who seemed genuinely interested in their stories. "Old Thompson's always been private," said Rosa, the middle-aged waitress, refilling his coffee. "But he changed a lot after those nieces showed up. They say it turned him into a different man." "How so?" Drake asked casually, taking a sip. "Before, he was all work, numbers, business. Now," she smiled, nostalgic, "sometimes I see him in the music store or buying art supplies. Who'd have thought that tough man had such a soft side?" Back in his hotel room, Drake organized all the information, photos, interviews, public records. Everything pointed to a drastic change in Michael Thompson's lifestyle around the same time the Anderson girls disappeared. His preliminary report to Robert Anderson was thorough. Strong circumstantial evidence. Thompson completely altered his routine 9 years ago. Significant spending on security, homeschooling, varied equipment. 4 girls, matching the approximate age of the Anderson children, live on the property. Extremely protected, never appear in public. Anderson's reply was immediate. "Continue." "I need visual confirmation." The opportunity arose during a regional agricultural fair. Through his sources, Drake knew that Thompson rarely attended public events, but this fair was too important for his business. Positioned strategically with his camera, Drake waited patiently. His heart nearly stopped when he finally saw them. 4 teenage girls leaving an exhibit tent in a hurry, accompanied by a tall man with gray hair. They moved quickly, like shadows, but he managed to snap a few photos. That night, in his room, he compared the images with old photos of the Anderson girls. The resemblance was undeniable. Even after 9 years, the distinctive features remained. The shape of their eyes, the outline of their faces, their posture. His phone rang at 11:47 p.m. "Mr. Anderson? Positive confirmation? It's them." On the other end, The silence was deafening. When Anderson finally spoke, his voice was laden with emotion. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Yes, sir. Other similarities are undeniable. There's more. They seem well cared for. Happy, even." Another long silence. "Keep watching. Don't do anything yet. I need to think." Drake continued his discreet surveillance. From a distance, he observed how the ranch ran like a living organism, with precise routines and carefully choreographed movements. He noted how deliveries always occurred at specific times, how employees seemed trained to protect the family's privacy. One afternoon, he witnessed a scene that disturbed him deeply. Through his telephoto lens, he captured a moment of family intimacy. Thompson was teaching one of the girls how to shoot a bow and arrow, his protective and proud stance unmistakable. The girl, identified as Sophie from his earlier notes, smiled at the man who, technically, was her abductor. In his next report, Drake found himself including observations that went beyond the professional. The girls show a strong emotional bond with Thompson. A high level of education is evident. Individual talents are encouraged. The environment appears loving and protective, though isolated. Anderson's response was brief: stay focused on safe extraction. But Drake couldn't ignore the complexity of the situation. In 2 decades of work, he had rescued people from truly horrible conditions. This case was different. The girls did not appear to be prisoners. They appeared to be protected. One particularly cold morning, while watching smoke rise from the ranch chimney, Drake realized he was witnessing something unique, a crime that had, paradoxically, saved its victims. His phone buzzed with a message from Anderson. "Approach plan in development. Maintain position." Drake pocketed the phone, eyes fixed on the distant ranch. Soon, that carefully constructed peace would be shattered. Long-buried secrets would emerge. Lives would be transformed. And for the first time in his career, the investigator wasn't sure which side of the story he was truly on. Night fell on Serenity Meadows, the stars shining as silent witnesses. In his observation post, Drake made his final notes for the day, knowing each word in his report would spark events that could forever change 2 families. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the weight of secrets about to be revealed, truths long buried, and decisions that had no return. The perfect storm was gathering on the horizon, and there was no way to stop it. The brown envelope on Robert Anderson's desk contained the proof he had waited 9 years for. Clear photographs of the 4 girls at the agricultural fair, facial recognition analyses confirming their identities, and a detailed report on their daily routines. 97% certainty, he murmured, running his fingers over Sophie's face in one of the photos. Her green eyes, so much like her mother's, stared back at the camera, unaware. In his strategy room, a hand-picked team planned every detail of the operation. Floor-to-ceiling diagrams of Serenity Meadows covered one wall, marked with entry points, escape routes, and strategic vantage points. "The security system is sophisticated," the tactical team leader explained. "Thompson is no amateur. We need to be smarter." Anderson watched the preparations with a mix of anxiety and resolve. 9 years of searching, sleepless nights, corrosive guilt, all leading to this moment. At the ranch, Michael first noticed small things out of place: unfamiliar tire tracks on the dirt road, a lost commercial drone hovering overhead, a strange car parked for too long on the main road. During his nightly inspection, he found something that chilled his blood. A micro camera camouflaged in a tree near the property boundary. Someone was watching. Someone had found them. Sophie was the first of the girls to sense something was wrong. Her instincts, always sharp, picked up on Michael's growing tension. "Dad," she called quietly, finding him in his office late at night. "Something's happening, isn't it?" Michael hesitated, looking at his eldest daughter, not the frightened little girl from the barn, but a wise and strong young woman. "Why do you ask?" "You're clenching your jaw," she observed, sitting in the chair across from his desk. "You only do that when you're really worried." Elsewhere in the house, Claire was working on her new painting, a large canvas dominated by dark tones and shadowy figures. Anne watched, intrigued. "It's different from your other work," she noted, studying the tense brushstrokes and unsettling shapes. Claire set down her brush, contemplating her piece with a distant look. "I've been dreaming about shadows," she confessed. "Shadows that watch us." Marie, practicing the piano in the music room, abruptly stopped in the middle of a Mozart sonata. Something in the melody had triggered an old memory. A tall man in a dark suit, an office overlooking the city, the sound of raised voices. Michael found all four of them gathered in Sophie's room that evening, as they did when they were small and scared. Without a word, he sat with them. "We need to go over the emergency protocols," he finally said, his deep voice carrying the gravity of the situation. "Is it that bad?" Anne asked, her intelligent eyes searching his face for answers. "Just a precaution." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "But I want you prepared. Anything unusual, any strange feeling, tell me immediately." From his surveillance post, Drake observed increased activity around the ranch. Thompson had discovered the camera, predictably. The man hadn't managed to keep the girls hidden for 9 years by being careless. His phone buzzed with a message from Anderson. "Team ready, waiting for an opportunity window." In the Manhattan strategy room, the tactical team finalized the last details. A helicopter was on standby, medical teams alerted, legal documents prepared. "Remember," Anderson instructed, "they're frightened teenagers who may react unpredictably. Maximum caution." Michael discreetly reinforced the ranch's security. New sensors were installed, escape routes reviewed, emergency supplies checked. Years of paranoia had resulted in an almost foolproof system. Almost. Sophie found Marie silently crying on the back porch one afternoon. "What is it?" "I remembered her today," Marie whispered. "Mom." "Why didn't she look for us, Sophie?" Sophie hugged her sister, feeling that familiar weight of responsibility. "We have Dad now," she replied, but her voice betrayed a new uncertainty. Claire continued painting her dark canvases, each more disturbing than the last. Anne buried herself in her books, as though the answers to her unrest lay in the pages of quantum physics and astronomy. Michael watched them, his heart heavy. 9 years of building a life, protecting them, loving them, and now it felt like everything was slipping through his fingers like sand. One night during dinner, the emergency phone rang, a line that had never been used before. The night watch staff reported suspicious movement at the property's edge. "Safe room! Now!" Michael ordered, his voice calm but firm. The girls moved with the practiced efficiency of years of training, disappearing through predetermined paths as Michael checked the security cameras. It was only a wild animal, but the incident put everyone on edge. "I can't lose them," Michael murmured to himself that night, gazing at the stars from his porch. "I can't." Receiving constant updates about movements around the ranch, Drake understood the noose was tightening. Thompson knew something was coming. "The element of surprise is compromised," he reported to Anderson. "He knows something's going down." Anderson gazed at Manhattan's skyline through his panoramic window. On his desk, the old photo of the girls seemed to stare at him in reproach. "Doesn't matter," he decided. "We've waited long enough." The atmosphere at the ranch grew heavier each day, charged with unspoken fears and premonitions. The girls stayed closer to one another, sensing they would soon need that unity. Michael did his nightly rounds more often, checking every corner, every shadow. In his office, a suitcase always ready contained essential documents, cash and 4 fake passports, his last resort. The perfect storm had formed. All it needed was a spark to start the fire that would forever change their lives. And that spark was on its way. The nightmare struck all 4 of them simultaneously that night, as though their minds were connected by an invisible thread of shared memories. Sophie awoke first, her silent scream echoing only in her mind. Within seconds, her sisters also woke, all panting and disoriented. "You too," Claire whispered in the darkness, her voice trembling. "The office," Anne muttered. "That huge office with the city view. And the man in the dark suit," Marie added, hugging her knees. Sophie turned on the lamp, illuminating their pale faces. It was like looking into a fragmented mirror, each reflecting a different aspect of the same fear. "Do you remember what he used to say?" Sophie asked, though she already knew the answer. "You must be perfect," they all quoted in unison. a collective shiver running through them that had nothing to do with the night's chill. The next morning at breakfast, Michael noticed something different in their eyes. Years of living together had sharpened his sensitivity to the smallest shifts in his daughter's behavior. "Dad," Anne began, her voice deliberately casual, "what was our other father like?" The coffee cup trembled in Michael's hand before he set it down. "Why do you ask now?" "We've been dreaming," Claire explained, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of the tablecloth. "About things that didn't make sense before, but now they feel more like memories than dreams," Sophie added, her green eyes fixed on Michael. Michael felt the weight of 9 years of secrets pressing on his chest. His daughters were no longer the frightened children from the barn. They were bright young women searching for answers. "He was demanding," he finally replied, choosing his words carefully. "He had very specific expectations for you. He dressed us the same," Marie suddenly recalled. "Always the same. Even our thoughts had to be the same." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Michael watched them process this in their own unique ways, Sophie with a measured determination, Claire through anxious sketches on a napkin, Anne through logical analysis, Marie lost in resurfacing memories. From his vantage point, Drake also noticed the family's shifting dynamic. Through his long-range lens, he captured tense discussions, serious expressions, and longer-than-usual hugs. "Something's different," he reported to Anderson. "The girls seem uneasy. Thompson is more protective than ever, if that's possible." "They're remembering," Anderson replied, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. "It's their age. Memories are coming back." At the ranch, Claire found an old drawing in a drawer, 4 identical little girls in identical dresses, a tall man in a suit in the background, and dark clouds over everyone. "I always knew," she murmured to herself, tracing the lines with trembling fingers. "Somewhere inside me, I always knew." Anne dove into online research, protected by VPNs and secure servers Michael had installed. She looked up cases of missing children from 9 years ago, and a name caught her attention: Anderson. Marie rediscovered old melodies on the piano, songs her mother used to sing, she now realized. Each note brought back fragments of a previous life: the scent of jasmine, the sound of high heels on marble, hushed laughter in a closet. Sophie, ever the protector, watched her sisters remember and suffered in silence. Her own dreams were sharper, more detailed. She remembered the day everything changed: shouting, slamming doors, her mother crying, a dark car at night. Michael found them all gathered in the barn at dusk, the same barn where their story began. He sat among them on the hay, as he used to when they were small. "We're not your nieces, are we?" Anne asked directly, always the blunt one. Michael felt his heart clench. "No," he admitted softly. "You're not." "Why did you lie?" Sophie asked, no accusation in her voice, only a deep need to understand. "To protect you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Always to protect you." Drake, watching from afar, made his final notes. The operation was set to begin, teams in place, routes established, every detail meticulously planned. But something troubled him. In 2 decades of work, he had never seen kidnapping victims so happy, so protected, so loved. In his Manhattan office, Anderson put the last touches on the plan. Legal documents, psychological assessments, a specialized trauma team, all ready to receive his daughters. Tomorrow, he decided, watching the sunset turn the skyscrapers gold. It all ends tomorrow. Night fell like a heavy blanket over the ranch. Michael discreetly reinforced security one last time, every instinct warning him that something was about to happen. The girls slept together in Sophie's room, as they did during storms. But the approaching storm brought no thunder or lightning. It brought long-buried truths, impossible choices, hearts on the brink of breaking. Michael stayed up, seated on his favorite porch, gazing at the stars. 9 years of love, care, and family, now threatened by a past that had finally caught up with them. "Dad?" Sophie's voice surprised him. She sat beside him, her green eyes shining in the darkness. "Couldn't sleep. I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of what's coming, but of losing all this, of losing you." Michael pulled her into a tight embrace, silent tears rolling down his face. "Nothing in this world can separate us," he promised. "Nothing." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying promises and threats. Somewhere in the darkness, teams moved in silence, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Dawn would bring more than a new day. It would bring the moment of truth that would forever alter all their lives. The early morning Manhattan skyline was a sea of twinkling lights against a still dark sky. Robert Anderson stood motionless before his office window, a cup of untouched coffee cooling slowly in his hands. "Mr. Anderson?" his assistant called quietly. "The team is ready for the final briefing." He nodded without turning, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the first hints of sunrise appeared. 9 years of relentless searching, of sleepless nights, of corrosive guilt, all culminating in the next few hours. The conference room was full when he entered. Determined faces looked back at him, waiting for his words. On the wall, a detailed map of Serenity Meadows dominated the view. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his firm voice masking the storm within, "today we bring my daughters home." The briefing was meticulous. Every aspect of the operation was reviewed. Ground teams, medical support, approach protocols, extraction routes. Nothing was left to chance. On the helipad, technicians performed final checks on the Bell 429 helicopter. Chosen for its ideal balance of speed, range, and discretion, Anderson watched every movement, every check, every detail. "Fuel check complete," the head technician reported. "Navigation systems calibrated." "She's ready, sir." Drake arrived with his own reports, stacks of documents detailing every aspect of life on the ranch. "Thompson keeps a strict routine," he explained, spreading surveillance photos across the table. "He's most vulnerable during his morning inspection at 6 o'clock. Anderson studied the images, Michael Thompson walking the property, checking fences, talking to employees, just a seemingly ordinary man at the center of a 9-year mystery. "And the girls?" he asked, voice trembling slightly at the mention of his daughters. Drake hesitated a moment. "They appear well cared for, happy even." He picked up a recent photo, 4 smiling teenage girls in a well-kept garden. "But there's something you should know, Mr. Anderson. Their bond with Thompson is strong, very strong." Anderson's stomach turned. For years he had pictured this moment differently, a heroic rescue from a cruel monster. Reality was proving far more complex. Near the ranch, the tactical team gathered in their own briefing. Non-lethal weapons were checked, communication devices tested, routes memorized. "Remember," the team leader instructed, "our priority is the girls. Thompson is secondary." The sky was beginning to lighten when the helicopter lifted off from Manhattan. Anderson watched through the window, lost in thought. In his pocket, an old photo weighed heavily, he with the 4 newborns in his arms, his wife smiling by his side. At Serenity Meadows, Michael Thompson was also awake long before sunrise. Years of constant vigilance had sharpened his instincts, and something in the morning air warned him of danger. His phone buzzed with alerts, suspicious movement at the property's edges, a helicopter ready at a nearby private airfield, unusual patterns on monitored frequencies. Upstairs, the 4 girls were already awake, gathered in Sophie's room as if driven by a primitive instinct to protect one another. "It's different today," Anne murmured, her analytical eyes studying the sky out the window. Claire clutched her sketchbook, page after page filled overnight with compulsive drawings, helicopters, shadows, half-remembered faces. Marie sat quietly at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys but not pressing them, as if the music had momentarily vanished from the air. Sophie, always the protector, stayed near the door, attuned to every sound in the house. Drake coordinated the ground teams from his makeshift command post. Fences neutralized, a technician reported, security systems bypassed. In the helicopter, Anderson received real-time updates. Every nerve in his body buzzed with anticipation and dread. What would he say to them? How would he explain the last 9 years? 5 minutes to approach point, the pilot announced. Michael gathered the girls in the kitchen, his calm voice belying the turmoil inside him. "Emergency protocols active," he said. "You know what to do." Sophie took a step forward, green eyes shining with a blend of fear and determination. "Dad," she said softly, "don't let them separate us." "Never," he promised, heart torn between love for his daughters and the weight of the secrets about to be revealed. The sound of helicopter rotors reached them first as a faint whisper, gradually growing impossible to ignore. On the horizon, the sun began its ascent, painting the sky in pinks and golds. "Teams in position," Drake said over the radio, awaiting final order. Anderson took one last look at the photo in his hand before slipping it back into his pocket. 9 years of search, guilt, determination, all converging at this moment. "Commence operation," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. At the ranch, the helicopter's whirring was now unmistakable. Michael guided the girls to the safe room, each second feeling like an eternity. "Remember," he said, looking each one in the eye, "no matter what happens, you are my daughters. Always." The four embraced him all at once, just like they did as scared little girls in the barn. For a moment, they were those same lost children seeking safety in his arms. Drake and his team moved methodically across the property, years of training honed into precise, calculated motions. The helicopter landed in a field nearby, stirring up golden dust in the morning light. Anderson stepped out, each footfall heavy with 9 years of waiting. Michael Thompson stood on his porch, unarmed yet imposing. His eyes met Anderson's across the distance, two fathers linked by an invisible bond of love and loss. Inside the house, in their safe hideaway, 4 hearts beat in unison. 4 minds shared the same fear, 4 souls bound by ties stronger than blood or law. The moment of truth had arrived, bearing promises of redemption and threats of destruction. The sun broke fully over the horizon, bathing the scene in golden light, as though even nature bore witness to what was about to unfold. The morning that would change all their lives forever had begun. The helicopter's rotors tore through the early morning air, echoing across Serenity Meadows like the harbinger of a coming storm. The Bell 429 hovered over the property in careful circles, its presence a silent threat against a clear blue sky. Michael Thompson remained still on his porch, eyes fixed on the helicopter circling like a predator studying its prey. Years of preparation for this moment, yet none of it could truly brace him for what was coming. The radio in his hand crackled. "Dad?" Sophie's voice was tense. "We're all in the safe room." "Stay there," he replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "No matter what you hear." At last, the helicopter landed in the field adjacent to the house, kicking up a cloud of golden dust in the morning sunlight. Its doors opened, and several figures emerged in precise tactical formation. Robert Anderson was the last to step out, tall, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his gray hair windswept by the helicopter's blades. His eyes found Michael's across the distance, and in that moment, something passed between the two men, a silent understanding of what was at stake. "Thompson," Drake's voice cut through the air. "The property is surrounded. Let us in peacefully." Michael didn't immediately respond. His gaze swept the perimeter, noting the agent's positions, calculating possibilities. There was no way out, not this time. "There's no need for violence," he finally said, his voice calm despite his inner turmoil. "But you need to hear me out first." Anderson stepped forward, ignoring Drake's silent objection. "Hear you out? You stole my daughters. 9 years, Thompson. 9 years searching for them." "I saved your daughters," Michael corrected, his voice now laden with restrained emotion. "And if you storm in here with all this force, you'll only traumatize them more than they already have been." Something in his choice of words made Anderson hesitate. "What are you talking about?" Inside the house, through the sound system in the safe room, all 4 sisters listened to every word. Sophie gripped Claire's hand tightly, while Anne tried to decode the underlying meaning. Marie trembled slightly, old memories surfacing. "That voice," she whispered. "I remember that voice." Michael descended the porch steps slowly, hands open to show he was unarmed. "Mr. Anderson, before you do anything, you need the truth, all of it." "The truth is you kidnapped my daughters." Anderson moved closer, only Drake's firm arm holding him back. "The truth," Michael continued, sadness coloring his voice. is that your daughters were being destroyed, methodically, by someone very close to you." A deafening silence followed. Anderson felt his legs weaken, memories of forgotten events starting to resurface. "William," he whispered, the name of his younger brother falling from his lips like a curse. In the safe room, Sophie jolted upright. "William," she repeated, the name triggering a cascade of recollections. "Uncle Will, he hurt us," Anne finished, her voice trembling, "whenever we failed his tests." "Whenever we weren't perfect," Claire added, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Michael pressed on, every word weighted by 9 years of secrets. William Anderson was conducting some twisted experiment on his nieces, testing limits, enforcing uniformity, punishing any sign of individuality. Anderson staggered as though he'd been punched. Fragmented memories began making sense. The girls' changed behavior, their sudden silences around William, unexplained nightmares. "How?" His voice faltered. "How did you find out?" "I was the Anderson family accountant," Michael explained. "I started noticing discrepancies in the Research Foundation's records, medical equipment, controlled substances, suspicious payments. When I dug deeper—" "The girls," Anderson completed, horror dawning on his face. "I uncovered documents about the experiments," Michael went on, voice trembling with reined-in rage. He was trying to run some kind of study on cognitive development in multiples. His own nieces were his test subjects. In the safe room, the 4 sisters clung to one another, quietly crying as the suppressed memories washed over them. Years of tests, punishments, constant fear, all packed away into a dark corner of their minds until now. "When I realized what was happening," Michael continued, "I tried to alert the authorities, but William had powerful connections, influence. No one would believe an accountant's word over a respected researcher." Anderson recalled the last time he saw his brother, a heated argument about the girls' education methods, William insisting he was only ensuring they reached their maximum potential. "So you took them," he concluded, his voice barely a whisper. "I had no choice," Michael answered, tears now flowing freely. "They showed up in my barn that night, terrified, starving, traumatized. I found out later that one of William's nurses, horrified by what she had seen, helped them escape. The tension in the air was palpable. Drake and his team held their positions, visibly moved by the revelation. "Dad?" Sophie's voice crackled through the sound system outside, freezing everyone in place. "Can we come out now?" Michael looked at Anderson, silently asking for permission. Anderson nodded slowly, still reeling from everything he'd learned. The house's doors opened, and the 4 sisters emerged, as they always did for important moments, together. They were no longer the small children Anderson remembered. They were young women, each unique in her own way. Sophie, always the leader, stepped forward. "We remember now," she said, her voice resolute despite her tears. "All of it." Anderson stumbled toward his daughters, barely able to stand. "Forgive me," he sobbed. "I should have seen. I should have protected you." Marie, always the most sensitive, was the first to move. She ran into Anderson's arms, and one by one, her sisters followed, until all 5 were embraced in a tangle of tears. 9 years of separation and pain. Michael watched with a mixture of joy and sorrow. He started to back away quietly, but Sophie called out, "Dad?" Her voice made him stop. "You're our dad too." Anderson raised his eyes to the man who had sheltered and protected his daughters when he couldn't. "Thank you," he said simply, but the word carried a world of gratitude. The sun was high now, shedding merciless light on the scene, 2 families torn apart by time and circumstance, trying to find a path to healing. Drake signaled silently for his team to pull back, recognizing that this was no longer a rescue operation, but the beginning of something far more complex. The helicopter stood motionless in the field, its blades still under the morning sun, a silent reminder of how even the most carefully laid plans can be transformed by truth and love. And in the midst of it all, 4 sisters held on to each other as they always had, their hearts beating in a shared rhythm of hope and healing, knowing that from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. And perhaps that was exactly what they all needed. The morning sun now illuminated the porch of Serenity Meadows, where two families, one by blood, the other by choice, were trying to process the revelations that had shaken their world. The helicopter remained quiet in the field, its blades idle and reflecting golden light, like a metallic observer to the unfolding scene. Michael had made coffee for everyone, an automatic gesture of hospitality that felt strangely normal amid the emotional whirlwind. Steaming cups were passed around as they settled in the spacious living room, the same place where, for 9 years, he had raised his adopted daughters. "I need to know everything." Anderson finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse with emotion. "From the beginning." Sophie, seated with her sisters on the large sofa, spoke first. "It started with the tests," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands on the cup. "Uncle William said we were special, that we had a unique potential because we were identical." "At first it was just games," Anne continued, her analytical eyes now misty with painful memories. "Puzzles, memory tests, coordination exercises. But then it got more intense," Claire added, instinctively reaching for her sketchbook. "If one of us did better, she was punished. We had to be exactly the same in everything." Marie, silent until then, surprised everyone. "He gave us injections," she revealed, her voice scarcely above a whisper. "Said it was to equalize our development." Anderson covered his face with his hands, silent sobs shaking his shoulders. The memories now came in torrents, subtle changes in their behavior, abrupt silences whenever William was around, nightmares with no apparent cause. How had he been so blind? Michael stood, walking to a shelf where he kept a thick folder locked away in a hidden safe. "I found this while investigating," he explained, removing carefully preserved documents. "They're the records of William's experiments." Drake, who had quietly stood in a corner of the living room, approached to examine the papers. Not even his years of investigative experience could have prepared him for the meticulously documented horror. "He was obsessed with the idea of nature versus nurture," Michael said, voice trembling with controlled anger. "He wanted to prove he could program genetically identical individuals to behave in a perfectly uniform way. The injections were different blends of neurotransmitters," Anne deduced, her scientific mind piecing it together. "He was trying to manipulate our brain patterns." Anderson lifted his gaze, horror flooding his features. "So the research foundation, those neuroscience investments, all of it was for this?" "He used the foundation's funds to bankroll his private experiments," Michael confirmed. "When I started spotting discrepancies in the books, I followed the money trail. That's how I found out." "Why didn't you come to me?" Anderson asked, a hint of accusation in his tone. "I tried," Michael replied softly. 3 times I set up meetings to talk about serious irregularities. 3 times William intervened, assuring it was just accounting errors." Sophie stood abruptly, crossing the room to the large window overlooking the garden. "I remember the day we decided to run," she said, her reflection in the glass showing a distant expression. "Marie fainted after one of the shots. Claire couldn't stop vomiting. Anne had a high fever. The new nurse, Sarah, helped us," Claire recalled. "She saw what was happening and couldn't bear it. She brought us here," Anne added. "Said she knew someone who could protect us." Michael nodded slowly. "Sarah found out about my investigation. She knew I was trying to expose William when she showed up at my office that afternoon begging for help." "You didn't hesitate," Marie finished softly, stepping toward the man who had become her second father. "How could I?" Michael replied, tears now rolling freely down his cheeks. "You were just terrified little girls who needed protection." Anderson rose, approaching his daughters. "What happened to Sarah?" A heavy silence followed. Michael answered, "Car accident 3 months later. Never proven, but—" "William." Anderson spat the name like a curse. The sisters moved closer to each other by instinct, a habit formed by years of mutual protection. None of the adults missed the significance of the gesture. "What happens now?" Sophie asked, her voice bearing the weight of a responsibility she had always carried for her sisters. Anderson looked at his daughters, not the small children he remembered, but strong young women, each with her own personality, dreams and fears. The price of the uniformity William had tried to enforce now seemed even more monstrous. "That's up to you," he finally said. "It always should have been up to you." Michael took a step toward the door, but 4 simultaneous voices stopped him. "No, you're our dad too," Claire declared through tears. "You saved us, protected us, loved us when we were broken. You let us be different," Anne added. "Taught us it was okay to be unique. You gave us a home," Marie said softly. "A family." Sophie looked directly at Anderson, her green eyes shining with resolve. "We can't choose between you, we won't." Anderson felt his heart squeeze with a mix of pain and pride. His daughters had grown into exactly what William had tried to prevent, individuals strong enough to make their own choices. "You don't have to choose," he said, surprising everyone. Turning to Michael, he added, "You did what I couldn't, protected them, loved them, let them grow. Separating them from you now would be cruel and wrong." Dracus, who had been silently observing, cleared his throat. "Technically, Mr. Anderson, as their biological father, you have legal rights." "Legal rights don't make a family," Anderson interrupted. "Love does, protection does, sacrifice does." He turned back to the girls. "And you clearly have all of that here. But we want you back in our lives too," Sophie said gently, "now that we know the truth." "And you will," Anderson promised. "We can build something new, something better. All of us." Michael looked at the man he had feared for 9 years, seeing him now in a different light. "The ranch is big enough," he offered. "There's a guest house that could be renovated." A tentative smile curved on Anderson's lips, the first in a long time. That would be good." The 4 sisters glanced at each other, a silent conversation passing between them as it always did in important moments. Then all at once they opened their arms to form a circle that included both Michael and Anderson. The sun was now high in the sky, its rays streaming through the windows and painting golden patterns on the floor. Outside, the helicopter seemed out of place, a symbol of confrontation in a moment of reconciliation. Drake made a discreet signal for his team to withdraw, understanding that his presence was no longer needed. This was no longer a rescue mission, but the start of a long-overdue healing process. As the tactical team quietly left, the 4 sisters remained in the center of the living room, still embracing their 2 fathers. There was much to be resolved, many wounds to heal, many adjustments to make. But for now, in that fragile, precious moment of peace, it was enough to know that love, in all its complex and unexpected forms, had triumphed over fear and the obsession with control. Somewhere out there, William Anderson was still a shadow to be faced, but that battle would wait for another day. Today was a day for truth, choices, and above all, the kind of love that turns strangers into family. The courtroom was as silent as a cathedral before a storm. William Anderson, once a respected researcher, now sat alone at the defense table, the weight of the charges against him seeming to shrink his once imposing presence. Robert Anderson watched his younger brother from the other side of the courtroom, a tempest of conflicting emotions churning inside him. Next to him stood Michael Thompson, solid and protective beside the 4 girls, now young women, who had changed their lives forever. "Are all parties ready to proceed?" Judge Edwards's voice echoed through the room. The prosecutor stood, adjusting his tie. "The state is ready, Your Honor." "The defense is ready," William's lawyer responded, though his client appeared lost in his own thoughts. Sophie squeezed her sister's hands, forming their usual chain of mutual strength and support. They had agreed to testify, all 4 of them, despite the terror of reliving those moments. Anne went first, taking the stand. With her characteristic clinical precision, she described the experiments, the injections, the endless tests, the constant pressure to be absolutely uniform. "He said we were his greatest project." Her voice wavered slightly. "That he would prove nature could be completely dominated by science." Claire brought her drawings as evidence, years of trauma captured in lines and colors, documenting her journey from terror to healing. Marie spoke of the songs that had been forbidden, how each unique note was seen as a threat to the uniformity he demanded. When Sophie took the stand, her green eyes locked onto William's for the first time in 9 years. "Why?" she asked simply, her voice carrying the weight of years of unanswered questions. William stirred in his chair, seeming to age decades in mere seconds. "May I speak, Your Honor?" The judge nodded, and William rose slowly. "You were perfect," he began, his voice breaking. "Four identical beings. A unique opportunity to prove my theory. I lost control. The obsession consumed everything." "What theory?" Robert demanded, unable to contain himself. William turned to his brother, tears now flowing freely. "Emily, do you remember Emily? Our twin sister who died at birth?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Robert visibly paled. "Mom never recovered," William continued. "She always said it was wrong for one twin to survive alone, that I should have been more like her. I spent my whole life trying to understand why we were different, why we couldn't be perfectly identical. So when my daughters were born—" "Four identical girls," Sophie finished softly, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Your chance to fix what you thought was broken." "I went mad," William admitted, collapsing into his seat. "The obsession with uniformity, the fear of individuality. It all came from my own unresolved trauma." Robert stood abruptly, decades of repressed memories flooding back. Their mother's relentless comparisons, the pressure on William, Emily's ghost haunting their childhood. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice choked. "How could I?" William replied. "You were the strong one, the successful one. I was the broken one, the incomplete twin." Judge Edwards allowed a moment of silence before continuing. "Mr. Anderson, William, do you understand the gravity of your actions?" "Now I do," he replied, looking at his nieces. "I tried to force a uniformity that should never exist. I nearly destroyed 4 precious lives because of my own demons." Michael watched as each of his adopted daughters processed the unfolding revelations. Claire sketched furiously in her notebook. Anne took meticulous notes. Marie whispered a quiet melody, and Sophie, ever the rock, held it together for everyone. The sentence was handed down. William would undergo psychiatric treatment in a high-security institution combined with prison time. Most importantly, he was barred from contacting his nieces until they, of their own free will, decided otherwise. After the verdict, in the hallway, Robert approached his brother before he was taken away. "Will," he said softly, using the childhood nickname, "I'm sorry I never saw your pain." William stopped, turning slowly. "No, Bob. I'm sorry I let my trauma hurt your daughters." To everyone's surprise, Sophie came forward, her sisters close behind. "Uncle William," she said, her voice gentle yet firm, "I hope you find peace." "How?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. "How can you even look at me after everything I did?" "Because we're different," Anne replied. "Each of us chooses our own path to healing. And because we learned about forgiveness," Claire added, "from 2 dads who showed us love is stronger than fear." Marie, typically the quietest, finished. "Maybe one day, when you're better, we can try to understand together." William openly wept, years of guilt and obsession unraveling in genuine remorse. Robert, driven by a long-dormant fraternal impulse, embraced his younger brother. Michael and the girls watched, aware they were witnessing not just justice, but also a generational healing. Later, back at Serenity Meadows, the expanded family gathered on the porch. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "So it's over," Sophie said, breaking the contemplative silence. "No," Robert gently corrected. "It's just beginning. Now we can really heal, really build something new." Michael nodded, observing his daughters, because they would always be his daughters too, each processing the day's events in her unique way. Claire was already sketching the courtroom scene, Anne organizing notes on generational trauma, Marie composing a new melody on the piano, and Sophie, at last, allowing her ever-present guard to relax. The judge's decision was clear. Custody of the girls would be shared between Robert and Michael, an unprecedented arrangement acknowledging the unique complexity of their situation. Serenity Meadows would remain their primary home, with Robert moving into the renovated guest house to be closer. "We're quite the family," Marie remarked, a gentle smile on her lips. "We're a perfect family," Sophie corrected, "precisely because we're all different." The sun finally set, but the coming darkness no longer brought fear. Stars began to appear in the sky, each shining with its own unique light. just as every member of this extraordinary family shone in their own special way. Truth had been revealed, justice served, and love in all its complex, imperfect forms had triumphed over fear and the obsession with control. In the distant barn, where it all began, a solitary light glowed like a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places, and that second chances, when offered with love, can heal even the deepest wounds. Spring arrived at Serenity Meadows, bearing more than blooming flowers. It brought the first supervised visits from William Anderson. After 18 months of intensive psychiatric treatment and therapy, he had made enough progress for the girls to agree to try rebuilding some form of relationship. The meeting took place in the restored barn, now transformed into a welcoming family gathering space, its walls adorned with Claire's paintings that told their extraordinary story. William entered hesitantly, his eyes drifting over each detail of the place where everything had begun. Sophie was the first to approach, her green eyes studying her uncle with a mix of caution and compassion. "Welcome," she said simply, offering a tentative but genuine smile. Tears in William's eyes said more than words could express. One by one, his nieces came forward, each in her own way. Anne with carefully prepared questions about his therapy, Claire with a portrait she'd painted of him during the trial, Marie playing softly a composition she'd created just for the occasion. Robert and Michael watched the scene side by side, their old suspicions replaced by a solid partnership, forged in their mutual love for these four extraordinary young women. "I never thought we'd get here," Robert murmured quietly. Michael smiled, watching how their daughters, because they would always be their daughters, led the reconciliation with a wisdom beyond their years. They taught us more about love and forgiveness than we ever could have imagined. Serenity Meadows had undergone a transformation in recent months. The guest house, now renovated, was Robert's home. Michael's old office had become an art studio for Claire, its walls lined with canvases documenting her journey from darkness to light. Anne had her own small lab in the barn, conducting experiments far different from those that once terrified her, this time driven by curiosity and a love of learning, not control. Marie filled the house with music, her piano echoing notes of healing and hope. Sophie, forever the protector, could finally breathe easy, confident her family was safe and united. "Remember the day you all got here?" Michael asked during that evening's dinner, the large kitchen table comfortably seating the whole expanded family. "Scared and hungry," Claire recalled, a soft smile curving her lips as she doodled on her napkin's edge. "And look at you now," Robert said proudly. "Strong, independent, unique." William, who had remained quiet, found the courage to speak. "I'm sorry I never saw before how beautiful your differences were. What matters is that you see it now," Anne replied pragmatically, adjusting her glasses like she did when she was emotional. Daily life settled into a natural rhythm. The girls divided their time between their two fathers, though the ranch remained their primary home. Robert spent his days working from the office in the guest house, always available when they needed him. William, though still living at the clinic, gradually took part in more family events through supervised visits and joint therapy sessions. His obsession with uniformity had given way to a genuine interest in discovering each niece's unique personality. One particularly meaningful afternoon, he arrived with an old box to share with the family. Inside were photographs and documents from his and Robert's childhood, including images of Emily, the twin sister they never knew. "I thought it was time to heal this wound too," he explained, as everyone gathered to examine the long-hidden memories. To everyone's surprise, Marie felt a special connection to Emily's story. "She lives on a little in each of us," she said softly, "not because we're the same, but because we're all part of the same family." Summer brought more positive changes. The garden Marie tended with such care bloomed into an explosion of diverse colors, a living testament to the beauty of individuality. Anne was accepted into a prestigious science program, her research focusing on how trauma affects brain development. Claire held her first art exhibit, her canvases portraying a story of transformation that moved everyone who saw it. Sophie, ever the natural leader, began volunteering for organizations supporting traumatized children, turning her personal experience into help for others. One starry evening, The family gathered on the porch as they often did. The night air carried the scent of jasmine from Marie's garden, and gentle piano music drifted from the house. "For you know," Michael began, his voice thick with emotion, "when I found you girls in that barn, I thought I was saving 4 frightened little girls. But you were the ones who saved us," Robert interjected, fully understanding what he meant. "All of us." William nodded silently, tears glistening in his eyes. Therapy had helped him understand that his obsession with control stemmed from his own fear of being different, of being incomplete without his twin sister. Sophie looked around at her sisters, each one unique and precious. Claire with her drawings spread everywhere, Anne with a neuroscience book in her lap, Marie silently tracing a melody in the air with her fingers. "We are quite the family," she said, echoing the words they had said so many times before, but with a deeper meaning now. "A perfectly imperfect family," Anne corrected with a grin. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in pink and gold. In the distant barn where it all began, a soft light glowed, not a symbol of fear and hiding anymore, but a beacon of hope and fresh starts. Serenity. Meadows had become so much more than a refuge. It was a living testament to how love can heal, how differences can strengthen, and how second chances can transform lives. As night gently settled over the ranch, sprinkling the sky with stars, each shining with its own unique brilliance, the family gathered on the porch knew they had found something extraordinary, not just healing for old wounds, but a promise of a future where love transcends blood, where differences are celebrated, and where each new day brings the potential for a brand new beginning. The barn of second chances had fulfilled its promise, transforming a story of trauma and control into one of love, acceptance, and above all, hope.